Who's up?
Yes. Oh, there's one. Alright, you're up.
Right. 10.
Yes.
Getting it done.
Only pretty faces allowed.
Good way to end the day, huh? Oh, fish. Ah, sucker. Eat it.
Oh, he's on.
Get him, Dad. Dad, get him.
Oh, there's fish. I got it. Are you up? Yeah, you're fish.
Got another one?
Nice.
Another snook. That's awesome.
So I think we're live. We're gonna let some people join on, so we're just gonna talk a little bit here. Mike here at Oregon Rod Reel and Tackle got some stuff he's gonna give away, and what we're gonna do is, if you like and share the video when you're watching it, we're gonna pick 2 people that like and share the video after we're done, and you're gonna get this little pack of fall Chinook stuff. We got some brine, slider, the hooks. These have been awesome, and then some of these short bus
Stiffies. They're the bumpers we use between our flasher and our main line. Pretty good stuff.
So yeah, be sure to like and share the video, especially if you know somebody that wants to learn more about trolling for fall Chinook. And we got Kyle Buschelman here from Willamette Valley Outfitters. If any of you guys have seen some of our videos, a lot of them are with Kyle. So he's going to talk about trolling for fall Chinook down in Tidewater, and you guys can ask questions. He's going to go through rigging and brining and kind of everything. So if you got questions, you can ask him, and he'll answer them. And then I had some people ask about drift boat fishing out of small boats. So a little bit later on, you can ask about that, and I can tell you a little bit about what Daniel, what we do when we're out in a little tiny boat. So yeah, you can ask questions. I'm gonna give it over to Kyle.
All right, well, like you said, I'm Kyle with Willamette Valley Outfitters, and what I want to do is I talk about kind of the basic rigs that I'm using for trolling the Tidewater down on all of our Oregon coast streams. It's prime time through September and in the middle of October. Starting with setups, and then I'll do some brines and things like that. And why I keep my setups pretty basic, partly because it's proven, but I don't like to reinvent the wheel that are going. But there's a couple things that I'm doing, I think, that help contribute to more fish. Not necessarily more fish, but landing more fish, which I think is huge. Today was a tough day on the water. We didn't get many opportunities, but the opportunities we got, we stuck, which was nice. And so we were kind of cool compared to an 0 for 2 day. We were a 2 for 2 day. So, and I think some of the setups help with that because we make mistakes quite a bit. So I'm going to start with just the basic rod setup, and there's a lot of ways of doing it, but the one that I like to do the most is, first off, I like having a 10.5 foot rod. I think for trolling, 10.5 is minimum for me, and that's back, middle, front, no matter what rod you're fishing. The 10.5 is nice because of the way when a herring bites, how the rod helps load, and I think you have just better action altogether. Fighting a fish, you tend to tire them out easier, and it just gives you options. But most importantly, if you have quality graphite and good high-end rods, on a tough day, it'll make the difference. And not everybody can afford a high-end rod, but you know, you can still get the 10.5s and some more maybe affordable brands out there. But the 10.5 for me, I like to look the rod in like 3 phases. We have the tip end, which is where, you know, it needs to be soft enough that when a herring's biting that, I mean, a fish is biting that herring, that they're not feeling resistance on that tip. And then it's got to have the ability to load. And so having the proper size rod with the weight you're using is important. But with that out of the way, there's a lot of guys, you know, talking to me on the water or calling me up going, do you like using a rudder system or a sliding system? And I'm a pretty basic guy. I like the sliding system. And the reason for that is because when I make a mistake, like trying to net a fish today, and the weight gets hung up, the fish can still run, and we don't break them off. And so that's the biggest reason for me. And also, I think when it's not a fixed deal, there's a little bit of give there, maybe even on the bite. So that's kind of what gives me the confidence. And so I do that. And I just run a couple 6 mil beads with a weed guard and then a slider in the middle. And my droppers for spring and fall, I run about 14 inches max. I really don't go more than that when I'm running, you know, our standard flasher here, that are no drag flashers. And I use the short bus. I also use the bumpers that JT provides, and I'm using an 18-inch bumper to my flasher. So very basic system. The other thing is with my leaders, people ask, well, how long do I do? Well, my leaders when I'm fishing herring are this long. They're whatever that is. I think it's 5.5, but I don't get into pulling out the tape. But I'm, again, pretty old school. I like the bead chain.
So that's from here.
That's just like this. So if I measure that out, that's right here to the top hook. And somewhere in the middle, I make sure I put a 4 bead chain because I want to make sure I don't have any tangles. And I think without that, sometimes, especially on those flood tides when we see all that grass, we can get balls of crap. So for me, that's why I do that. And I run 30-pound tests. So I like the Seaguar STS. That's kind of the standard for me. I use it for springers. I use it for fall Chinook in the drift boat, and especially when I'm trolling. And the reason I like the fluorocarbon over a mono is because of the lack of memory. It seems like if you get a tangle, the mono's done. And when you're guiding or fishing a lot and you get tangled, which you will if you're grinding the bottom like you should, you want to be able to untangle it and just get it back in the water. And with this STS, I could have a pretty good messed up leader, untangle it, put a bait on it, and it's going to fish with even when it's all kinked up and not break. Because sometimes when you're just going, I don't want to sit and have to put new leaders on all the time. I kind of do that when I start feeling abrasion or the hooks go bad. So for me, again, very basic, but it works, and I don't want to, you know, start doing things that just because it looks cool, but this is a proven method. So
how long a leader would you run if you had like a 9-foot rod, or some guys don't have
the same? I think it's just this. I think
5 foot.
I think it's the same. Yeah, I think when it comes to rod length, it doesn't affect what happens from, you know, your bumper down. I think with rod length, I think the biggest effect is more action of the troll, how that rod loads on a fish, how you detect the bottom and things like that. I think a 10.5-foot rod is very forgiving, especially when you're fishing in those barbless hook areas. You can kind of absorb that bite very much like a fly rod does, and they just tire out fish and seem to do a really good job. And you know, when you have better than average hook to land ratios, you have to start wondering what it is, because we're all using a lot of the same stuff, so it's got to come down to maybe rod technology or something. But a lot of guys are using 10.5.
Did you go over a gap? Is there a certain?
Yeah, so with my hooks, unless I'm fishing, you know, just into the ocean and we have to use 2 hooks, I'm a 3-hook guy. I use it spring and fall. And in the fall, I run 2 3/0s in the back, and then the top hook's a 4/0. And I use the owner herring hooks because they're more of a thin wire hook and they're extremely sharp. The reason I like the thin wire hook is because they're just sharp, 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 hurt your fingers sharp when you're baiting the hooks, and they're thin, and I don't think they take away from the action of the herring, which is kind of an important thing. And so for me, we have different finger sizes, but on my hooks, I do 3 fingers from back hook to middle hook, essentially, kind of like this, really close to that, and then the middle hook to the top hook, like right here, I just do kind of 2 fingers. That's kind of been my standard. So almost 3, then 2. You'll have to figure that out, but ultimately, and I'm going to rig up a herring, but show you how I come up with that, and it might be different for you, but this is for pretty much a green label. If you start fishing blues, you'll want to up the hook size a little bit, and you'll want to probably extend it just a tad. But I like the greens, and if I want a bigger bait, I fish a whole green. If I want smaller baits, I cut them down, and I can also do anchovies all on one rig, so it's pretty nice. So the first one I'm going to do is just rig up my cut plug and kind of go from there. And if you have any questions, please ask, and then we will go ahead and
anybody watching, you know, you can write a comment. You know, if you got any, if the audio is good, you could say where you're coming from. We're here in Eugene.
Sure.
Out of here in Oregon, rod, reel, and tackle. So
yeah, the cool thing is with this is people always ask, you know, because we got the Oregon rod on the boat, where it is, where do you get your bait, where do you get your tackle, and Oregon Rod, Reel, and Tackle's in Eugene, but they do have an online component coming up here very soon, and it's a good shop to come to if you want to get stuff done and
you got
get all this stuff.
Brian Sweeney is asking what knots you use.
What knots? I just use a regular. I use this egg knots like you would for like if you were steelhead fishing. I just do 3. Some guys don't. Some guys do a double system here and or tied directly to the hook. But the reason I do the egg knot is it holds straight. It's like my hooks lay straight, and that's the other reason why I use the fluorocarbon. It's a little stiffer, and so it lays straight in the water and it doesn't get kinky for me. I don't like, you know,
I know when we fish beads in the winter, we use that. It keeps your hooks in line.
Yep.
And that helps get more pressure on the fish when you go to turn them. Whereas if you have, say, a regular knot that can twist on your bottom hook anyway,
right.
You can end up having the fish be able to move it, dislodge it. Whereas those egg loops, you're direct right to the fish, and you can turn them a lot better.
I used 2 hooks for years. The biggest reason I go to 3 hooks is that there's another hook to catch it in the face. And I do not like losing fish, and these hooks are sharp. I mean, there's nothing. I've done all sorts of hooks, and it seems like these owner herring or the mosquitoes are legitimate. And so I'm going to just
we got Shane Riddle's asking how you get all the hooks aligned, so they look like they're kind of lined up.
I don't think it matters. It just actually, I've been fishing with this leader for 2 days. I know some guys don't do that, but I do. Remember at buoy 10, I told you these hooks were, you know, this is on day 3 and they're catching fish.
So it doesn't matter necessarily if the hook's twisted or.
No. I remove my stuff when I think the points are bad, but after a fish, I just run an edge on them. But yeah, because once you rig them through, they kind of do their thing, and you can kind of see here maybe, I don't know, but the hooks aren't in line. But they do lay straight, and I think the reason they're laying straight is because of the knots that I'm doing for it. And this is not something new, but I definitely didn't start doing my guiding with this. I was a 2-hook guy, and then you kind of learn things and you adjust. And
you got Sherry's asking what angle you prefer for your cut plug, I think. So
well, I do the Buschelman cut, which is pretty much just a lot of years of cutting in the box, but honestly I prefer the coho cut. If you have that dual box, do that dual cut, and it works really good. We have one right here, and there's a bunch of brands out there, but you know, it gives a little tighter spin, I think. A cut box works great. I don't really use a box anymore, but sometimes I do, because sometimes maybe I even need to fine tune, or maybe my spin doesn't work, but it seems to always have a pretty tight wiggle to it, and it catches fish. So, but if you got the dual one, try the coho and do both. I mean, if you got 3 rods, mix it up until you find what's keying.
Greg's asking if there's a difference between the herring hooks and the mosquitoes.
Not really. They're both thin wire, except when you start getting to the 2-aught hook, the eye on those mosquitoes is extremely tight. So running 30-pound tests through there is really difficult if you're doing this knot that I'm doing. So you kind of got to get creative on your knot, but they're sharp. I use the 2-aughts in the spring when I'm fishing a lot of red label. So I'll use a 2-aught, 2-aught, 3-aught in the spring, but in the fall I like the 3-aught, 3-aught, 4-aught. And there's not a big difference, but you know, if you can just get the herring hooks, that would help. But they're both a thin wire hook, and I don't like red hooks. I know some guys do, but it's kind of one of my deals. Like, I don't like silver hooks and red hooks, so the herring hooks are nice because they're not that color.
We noticed when we fished in the Rogue Bay and other places too, we use silver hooks occasionally, and you would get smolts eating those shiny hooks and the red hooks too. So it definitely draws in fish you don't want biting.
Yeah, I mean, they work. I know guys around me have red hooks and they do well, but everybody's got their little preference for whatever reason, so I don't know. That's kind of what I do. But hope that answered your question there. But as for the herring, this one that's already cut, I'll rig a cut one up, and then I'll do a...
We got a question about hook size.
Yeah.
What's your hook size?
It's a 3/0 for my middle and my back hook right here. And then my top hook's a 4/0. I like a little bit bigger hook on the top, so it allows me to kind of bite through, and hopefully when I go through that here, you'll see why. Because you can actually get a different turn on your bait where you kind of position your top hook. So, and I think this is kind of where it gets confusing for people with 3 hooks on how to make it good. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Jack's asking, do you vent your bait?
Yes.
Yes.
Why? I had a guy show it to me years ago and it worked, so I did it. But the biggest reason is once the guts are out of the bait, it allows water to kind of, I think maybe they don't blow out as quick. When I'm fishing frozen baits, which half the time I got frozen baits and half my bait is brine bait. So the frozen baits have the guts in it and I don't vent them. But with my thawed out brine baits, they're a little softer. I'll put the vent in there and remove the guts. Some people always ask, guts or no guts? Well, if it takes a little bit of work to get them out, I leave them in. If they come out easy, I remove them. That's pretty much it. And after about 1 troll, if the bait looks great, I'll pull the guts out. So,
for people just joining us, I talked a little bit in the beginning. If you liked and share the video, we got 2 little prize packs here with flashers, brine, a lot of the stuff that Kyle uses, pretty much all this Kyle uses when he's rigging up. So we're going to pick a winner after this live seminar is over. So if you're just joining us now, like and share the video, and we'll put you in the drawing.
Sure. That's the other thing is when we do the brine here in a minute, these brine baits are going right in my cooler for tomorrow, so it's not like we're not sharing what catches fish. It's pretty simple, and it works. It creates a nice bright shiny bait, which I think is important. But just kind of go over I have a full herring here and I got a cut herring here, and like I said, what's nice about this 3 hook system is that I don't have to have a bunch of leader rolls that are 2 hook, set for anchovies, set for full bait, and all that. And I used to do that, and it was just not efficient. So the 3 hook system is nice because, again, when I'm setting this up, I'm going to go through the cuts, the shallow side of the cut. I'm going to make kind of like a deep, come through there kind of deep. I'm going to feed that hook through, and then the middle hook, I'm going to follow it just right through. Try to go through that same hole so you don't blow out the side of your bait, and then pull it through. The top hook, I like to go on the high side and then kind of go around the bone and keep it kind of nice and tight to the top. Pretty simple, but that's where I want that thing rigged. It's durable, lasts a while. And then I want to make sure that middle hook is kind of laid. So this back hook positions this middle hook. So it's laying sideways. I'm going to take that back hook and I'm going to pull a little tight. You get the mid bone. I'm going to go just above that a little bit. I'm going to go through with my back hook and then make sure that middle hook's facing that way. And what you get is this. This will lay down when you're trolling. You have the middle hook kind of, it's going to bite you when they eat it. And then that nice top hook is holding the bait true. And so again, 3 hooks, lays pretty nice, and that's going to provide a nice tight spin on that bait, and it's going to be good to go. And then you see that the back hook is right there. It's right just at the tail, just past. And based on your preference, you can extend that back a little bit. Some guys like them back here, but what I have found out is when you start getting too far of a gap in your hooks, if those fish chew that bait and it's a top hook in the mouth, this back hook can stick them in the side of the head, pull the front hook out, and then you're fighting that fish way difficult. But when you get them in, it doesn't matter. But I like to keep that my distance comes from that. So when people ask what's my distance, it's that. And for me, it's 3 fingers, 2 fingers on my gap. So pretty much it. So that's really nice and works pretty solid. And then just I get rid of the bait like that. Now with the full bait, if I wanted a bigger profile bait, let's say I just want to try something different, and I really like doing this when we're fishing right there on the bubble. A lot of times is like an anchovy, take that middle hook, and I'm going to rig this whole herring really close to the middle, right like that, kind of a deep bite, pull it, and then I'm going to take this top hook, I'm going to add a little bit of a bend, and then go right down the middle of the mouth, up through the nose, and then what you have is you got this trailing hook by the tail, you have a bait that's got a slight bend in it, just like that, and what you're going to get is just a little bit of a bigger roll. It's a bigger profile bait and very durable, especially if for some reason your baits aren't quite brined well enough and they're blowing out. Sometimes this can keep you from blowing out your baits if you don't use helmets and things like that, which I don't. So the full herring's that way, and I would rig my anchovy the same way. The only difference on the anchovy is that I might have this middle hook further back depending on how much cup I wanted. If I wanted more cup in that bait, I would adjust that distance between the head and where I bite that middle hook. But that's a fish killer, and I like to have one rod that fishes a full sometimes. I don't like to designate everything to one thing because fish key in on different things. So that's
do you cut your herring before you brine it?
No, I don't. But sometimes what I'll do in the mornings, if we got downtime, I'll cut a bunch and throw them back in the brine. But I don't. There are advantages, I think, to doing that for those guys that like to do that. I just don't, because I just put them all in, and it gives me the option of having a whole herring if I want to do that.
I know when we're fishing, if there's a bite turning on, or a lot of times I'll try to have 5 or 6 ready,
right,
that I'll cut, when we're running back up. Because in a drift boat, it takes you an hour.
Yeah, it does, and you guys do it pretty efficiently. There's a couple guys out there that you see in the drift boats that just do well because they maximize the tide and everything else, and Chad will get into that. But so this 3-hook system, consider it. If you're finding out that when you're out there fishing and you're getting 2 to 3 opportunities a day, and you're going home with a 1 for 3 or an 0 for 3, maybe check the hooks first and start working your way up from there. I personally like a sliding system. Doesn't matter what brand of flasher you use, I use Short Bust and they're really good. The other thing about Tidewater trolling is fishing without a flasher is very effective. And so you can make that connection really quick. I think I got a big old mess here, but ultimately you can do that by simply just popping off the flasher. And I like that option because there's times when there's a ton of boats out there and you just want something different, maybe low key. You can I'm a big fan of clips right there. I can just make that happen. And then the flasher's gone. And now we're fishing just, a herring, and it's going to be that 5.5 foot leader now, maybe a little longer now because I got an 18-inch bumper right here. But this is very effective, and there's just sometimes a flasher is overkill, and you might find that'll add a fish or day to the box.
Another thing to add about the sliders is we always used a fixed setup for a long time, and we were on the Umpqua years ago and had a fish. It was such a hard takedown that it snapped the leader, and I don't know how big the fish was, but it was one of the hardest takedowns. So after that, Daniel was like, we need sliders, and we did that ever since, and it saved us also getting hung up in the net. And we use it for steelhead, bobber dogging too, a lot of times, because steelhead whipping around, that fixed, you don't want that weight in a fixed position. It's the same with salmon.
I like it because of the net issue.
Yeah.
We always find a way to get that. Well, I'm trying to get that fish netted quick. It just seems like I do a pretty good job of getting the weight in the net more often than I'd like. But I think also on that bite, there's a little more give on that bait, and it might allow that fish to hold on just a little bit longer. So
Seamus is asking if you ever use a small spinner blade down the leader.
I don't, but I know my good friend Cody Herman is all about that, and he's had great success running a spinner blade above. You know, it's funny, in the spring we do that with our anchovies. We do it with things like that. I kind of just run my herring pretty normal. I like the smell of herring. I don't get too crazy on my scents. I do add anise. I have a couple batches in my cooler. I always have a few brine and anise, and then herring, pretty natural.
Are there certain flasher colors that you prefer certain times of the day, or is every fishery different?
Just about the time you think you got it figured out, it changes on you. But there's a couple colors that I just have to have in my arsenal, and it's pretty much the electric pole dancer and Sweet Abby Sweet Abby's gonna fish every day. It ain't coming off. And then I like this one right here with this green and red, whatever. It's I'm kind of colorblind, so forgive me if I'm giving you the wrong colors. But this one here has been a killer this in the spring and this fall too.
Does it seem like light sun, more sun, different colors, or cloudy?
Yeah, I like when it's sunny. I like to use the bright ones, and that's why with these this color here when you start getting into the Super Series flashers, and the guys are doing the Dodgers, this works really good. It puts off a lot of shine, so yeah, having that shinier background works pretty good too. And that's why I think when that UV color on like the Pole Dancer series works and those other colors is because it's a brighter color, and I think it's very effective. So
yeah, we use a lot of chrome,
yeah,
silver.
Chrome is good. And I guess since let me finish. I did the baits. I guess I'll get into the Super Series unless people got more questions, and we'll change course as people want.
Yeah, just ask questions. Again, people who are just joining us, Mike here at Oregon Rod Reel and Tackle is giving away a couple little prize packs here. Some pretty awesome flashers he's going to talk about right now. If you want to get entered into it, like and share the video so your friends can jump on and watch it. And this is something that I actually don't know anything about, so it'll be cool to learn a little bit here.
Well, the cool thing is I'm new to it too. I'm very hard to drink Kool-Aid on things. I mean, beads took me forever. Remember that?
Yeah.
I hated using beads. I'd come down here and I was
Us
not
too.
doing it. We were cutting the yarn down as small as we can go, and then the Kool-Aid was good. These are effective. I didn't start fishing them until just buoy 10, honestly. And I'm not a pro with them, but I'm catching fish on them, so I'm figuring it out. And I had some good guide buddies up in the Portland area that have been doing this for a couple years, up there on the Columbia for the fish that are moving through buoy 10 on their way up above Bonneville. They've been doing this and just absolutely put on clinics. Cool thing is as you start getting down the coast, we're always about a year behind from the Columbia stuff, it seems. But we're kind of going full circle here on our techniques. This was something that the old timers were using last year. We're like, God, they're not going to catch a fish. Well, they were. These catch fish, and it's because of the action. Now, there's a couple brands out here. Like I said, I stick with the short bus. I like them. They work really good. It creates a different action altogether than the no drag series of flashers that we have that we're all accustomed to using. This here is a pretty big hoop. It needs to be trolled faster. So the question is, can you do them both together? Yes, you can. But it seems like when I've been the most successful with these, it's been when I've designated the boat to it, because I'm looking for a particular thump, it seems like, and and I learned that by the hard way. I watched a good buddy of mine on the Columbia this year pass me, and I troll pretty fast. He passed me pretty quick and hooked 3 fish before he passed me. And you talk about humble pie. Well, you as a guide, you learn quickly on adjusting. So I drank the Kool-Aid. It was kind of good. And the difference is I use the sliding system. The bumper systems are a little bit longer. I use a 24-incher. And the reason you do that is it gets away from the weight, and it allows this Dodger to kind of get its action going a little bit bigger. You can, with that weight, you can have it fixed. I've seen guys do the rudder system to the bumper, and actually, because they have no intention of fishing the bottom, it's a great suspended fishing technique, is they hook that weight right to a clip right on their main line, and does that, and they don't have the
You
dropper.
essentially need some room for it
You
to
do,
swing,
yeah.
swing off the
You
bottom.
do. I don't fish these on the bottom. If I do, I hit the bottom quickly and take a few cranks up. But this is nice. All these coastal streams have that second rod endorsement. Got to put these on the front, raise them up, you know, suspend them a little bit, and try them out. But you know, the biggest tip in the fall is, I think, increase your speed, and this will make you do it. Again, they move nice. And what's neat about it is it makes that herring, if you're trolling a herring behind it, or a super bait, or a spinner, that spinner and those baits work behind that, and it's a really good action. I mean, I was impressed with it, and like I said, once I saw it and kind of got educated on it, it worked pretty good. The difference is that unlike my longer leader with my herring, when you're running the Super Series or anything like that, or even a Pro Troll, you're going to use a shorter leader. And so what I'm doing, this is, I don't measure.
3 feet, maybe?
It's this. It's right there for me. So it's about 36 inches, I would say. Really close, 32, 36. I think shorter is better because you don't, if it's too long, that spinner is going to lose the action as this thing starts really rotating. And these things actually do a pretty good loop. I mean, it's significant. And so you're going to get a lot of action with that. And with that being said, with the spinners, I have found that the fish I have hooked have been on, they work really good with the smaller bladed spinners. This is a 5, and then I think the 4s work really good if you are building your own spinners or getting them. And these are R&B spinners, and these are just Cascade blades, and the 4s and 5s work really good with this. And so I like doing the spinners with it, but herring works just as well if you wanted to nail that down and try it.
So herring, you're trolling faster is the reason people use the super baits and stuff, because the herring gets torn up quicker, or
No.
it doesn't really affect them?
I don't think that's an issue as much as super baits are easy and they have color to them, and you can add your different scents. You can put the tuna in there, and that's really effective. And yeah, and especially upriver, the guys that are fishing near Bonneville, you're dealing with a lot warmer water. So yeah, the baits, if you're catching them on a plastic lure at a greater rate than bait, then stick with it. And that's why those guys, and they just have a constant action all the time, and they're really easy to use. So again, I'm just starting to fish those, but you know, they're pretty effective. I can't go completely because, you know, there's just a place for this flasher is easy to use. It's easy to use when we have a bunch of people in the boat, and they catch fish. And the downside with a bigger, you know, these Dodgers is that they create a lot of drag in the water. So when you hook up, there's a high loss ratio. I mean, I was losing fish and then going to the dock and talking to some buddies going, what am I doing wrong? And so there are a couple things you can do. And I don't have this rigged up for it, but there's some stuff online already. But a good guide buddy of mine shared it with me after he put a clinic on one day. And he has a system that he ties a 40-pound, almost like a small bumper, and it clips on here to the barrel, and then it's still attached to that, but then it comes down, and then that snap goes to your leader, and then you connect the flasher with he uses shrink tubing, and then that way on the fish it pulls out, and then this is just hanging when you're fighting, and it's a no drag system for the most part. There's other systems that are out there. You can use wire, you can use a shrink tubing. It'll take some experimenting, and I'm just learning that, but it's still a very effective. I mean,
You can probably YouTube that.
you can. You know, I know the guys at Cousins did that, and then my buddy Steve showed me the shrink tube thing, and it was effective. And for him, he saw the catch-lander ratios increase, and it's tough when you hook 5 and you lose 5. So that's why I stayed away from these initially.
Yeah.
But once you kind of, with the spinner, it seems like, especially when it's short, a barbed spinner is hard. Fish eat it and they stay pretty buttoned.
What's the difference in weight when you're trolling, say, on the coast with a traditional setup compared to this?
Well,
On your-
not much different
level.
really, but it seems like 12s work really well with this. But you could do 10s and lighter, but
Do you still want a 45-degree angle?
or even greater. And, you know, mind you, as you increase weight, you're going to have to increase speed to maintain those angles. And in the fall, we have warmer water. And this is the thing that's fun to watch on the river. And it's kind of, you watch all the different boats, and you got a certain group of people catching fish, and they're trolling fast, and then you have guys trolling slow. I think in the fall, when we have 62 to 70 degree water, a faster presentation is a little more ideal. And so I fish a lot of 10s and 12s here in the fall. Even in the shallow stuff, I mean, there's stuff where we fish where it's 8 feet deep.
Yeah.
And we are hitting the bottom with 12 ounces, and we are still at 45s.
Yeah.
And or slightly greater than that fishing, and it catches fish. It seems like that faster troll outfishes a slow troll almost every time. In the spring, we want to slow it way down because we're dealing with 50 degree water, and 55 it's slower.
We troll fast because we don't have a choice.
Right.
And it works pretty good.
Yeah.
You see guys going a certain speed, and I think part of the issue is there's a fine line there between having your bait spinning
Right.
down there at a slower speed.
Sure. So these systems work. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. You got questions on this. They work, and like anything else, you got to give them a try. It took me a while to do it, but when I was kind of experiencing a slow bite, I tried it, and I actually saw an increase in hookups, and hookups are good. We
Yeah.
can work with that, you know.
We're giving away 2 if you like and share the video. We're going to pick out 2 winners so you can give it a shot. Also got hooks in here, pretty much everything you need to rig up and get out there.
Sure.
You guys can keep asking questions. We'll.
Why don't you go over the drift boat stuff,
Okay.
and we'll talk about one thing I want to go over with these we're talking coastal fall Chinook. There's a lot of people in these small waterways. There's a ton, and there's a lot of guides out there, and a lot of guys in boats trying to have a good day on the water. One of the hardest things to do is to have that etiquette that everybody agrees on the water. It's really tough creating wakes as people are trolling. What is the etiquette? Now, my opinion, and I wish it would go that way, is that when you're traveling through boats that are trolling, you either you get away from them as far as you can and you go fast, or you go by it and idle.
Yeah.
Not at 12 miles an hour plowing water.
Yeah, well,
it makes it really tough.
We know that from experience. You
Yeah,
know, a lot of
especially in the
guys
drift boat.
get mad, you know, when guys fly by, but it creates a much smaller wake.
Yeah,
and
it does.
well, we used to fish out of a 12-foot Gregor
Right.
boat, you know, and we're sitting in there. You know, guys go by slow, and it's just like a wakeboarding boat.
Yeah.
So that's nice when people fly
And
by.
not everybody's got the 24-foot guide boat that can handle everything. You know, there's a lot of guys in drift boats. There's guys in kayaks out there, and so when you're going around people, pay attention to that. Don't plow up the middle when there's boats on each side of you. Try to do your best. Make an attempt anyway, and then I think people will be happier. You're still going to upset people, unfortunately, but
Alan's asking what our preferred tide is, and I'll say what ours is.
Yep.
Out of a drift boat. We like to fish an hour or 2 of an early outgoing tide on the river we fish mostly, and that's because we can get up to where we have confidence in, and we can make 2 or 3 passes in a drift boat, and then we have the whole flood, the whole incoming tide to come in, and we tend to do really well on an early outgoing for a little bit, and then the incoming gets in at a good time where there's a good bite around noon or whatever it ends up being. So when we're in a drift boat, actually I'll let you say what your preferred tide is.
doesn't matter. I actually like a softer tide, but just the minute you think a softer tide's good, the big tides start putting fish in, and there's advantages to both. Big tides, fish kind of get upriver. I fish what the river says. When it's high, I fish high. When it's low, I fish low. I kind of follow the tide. There are areas on your systems that if you know where that fish hold, deeper sections, fish are going to hold there on the outgoing, and I like to focus on that. But right now, on the rivers we're at, we had a high slack this morning at 7:30. For me, that's ideal because I'm going to have a good hour of upstream trolling through the flood. Then we're going to have that high slack bite, and then an hour or 2 where we should have a start of an outgoing. Now that isn't always true, but I really like that in the morning. And there's also the morning bite that you can't ignore. It always happens in the fall. So
when we're fishing out of a drift boat or a small boat, you're at a disadvantage mainly because you have a lot less passes. A lot of times we'll laugh about it when we see like Kyle fly by us 2 or 3 times while we're going back up river. He's already made like 2 passes. So you have to be really efficient with your setups. You have to be. I think you have to have more stuff prepared. Daniel will go through and tie up a lot of rigs ahead of time. I'll have herring cut ahead of time, and it's just us 2 most of the time. But when we launch the closest launch to where the bite's going to be in the morning, so we're not spending an hour trolling up river. And like I said, we like an early outgoing for a little bit. And another thing to think about is having your boat set up. When you do catch a salmon, you need somewhere to be able to bring it in. You don't want all your rods all over the place. In big sleds, you have a lot of room. In a drift boat, you don't have that much room. So have your cooler in a certain spot so it's out of the way, and that way you're ready. Because we've had times where it's like you got a 30-pound Chinook and you don't have anywhere to put it. You can't get to the net quick enough, or you're tripping around stuff, and you don't want to screw up when you get a chance to get a good fish. So that's kind of one thing. Another thing is when you see a bite going on, with the river we fish, we've got it dialed in pretty good. But if we see 1 or 2 fish or 1 or 2 nets fly, we will make shorter passes. So we might go from one buoy to a certain area that might only be 300 yards, and we'll race back up and we'll do it again. We want to go in front of those fish as many times as we can, because the bite might be going on elsewhere in the river too, but right where you are is where you need to be fishing, instead of going past through that bite and think, oh well, I might get into another bite. You might end up in between fish.
That brings me to a question that people ask me, especially in the boat, is once we get a fish, do you just continue trolling, or do you go back up and come through there again? Well, when I hook a fish and we land it or whatever, I like to get up, and while we have everybody kind of reeled in, I like to get back up river a little bit, or whatever base direction I'm going, so I can kind of come through that area again and maximize the bite in that particular area. Definitely don't like to leave fish for fish.
Yeah, and if you're in a bigger boat, you might have a chance to work through a longer run and get back up quick, and you can make longer runs during a bite. But yeah, in the drift boat, we make real short runs when the bite's going on, and then if we make a pass and we hook a fish, we go back up, we might miss one. We'll keep going until we make maybe 1 or 2 passes where we don't have a bite or we don't hook up, and then we'll just continue the troll. And because sometimes the fish just they get worked pretty good too when all the boats crowd in. But that's another.
That's when pulling that flasher off works really good. You talk about why we do what we do. That's when you have 20 boats with flashers going through a hole. Sometimes run it without one. Something you should try. It might put 1 more fish in the box a day on a tough day, and you'll be glad you did it. So.
And I notice a lot of times going through video that when we're filming is a lot of times we get bites when Daniel's speeding up or slowing down or turning slightly. Mm-hmm. And so that's something to keep in mind if you're trolling. A lot of you see underwater videos of salmon will just follow and follow and follow. So being able to just change your direction a little bit, speed up or slow down just occasionally can trigger a bite. You see it a lot with coho. But Chinook are the same way.
Oh yeah, I'm always kind of doing what we call a drunken troll. I'm kind of always doing this, and speeding up, slowing down, and it seems to work, so I do it. But yeah, so
that's pretty much it for we'll time the tide in a drift boat so that we can get a good full incoming, and we don't really run that far, like say on the Umpqua or the Sayusla. We can't run 800 yards downriver because we're wasting time. And we also don't make super long runs. So we might work an area for a while, then we might make 1 long run, and then we work that little area for a while, and you just kind of break it apart a little bit more into smaller chunks.
Yeah, this in the boat every day, people ask a lot of questions on things, and they'll ask, man, we got lucky, landed a lot more fish, and just remember, when you do hook up with these fish, that you have to kind of cater to them sometimes. They're big, they fight hard, and you have boats around you. And so that's the other thing, is making sure that your drags are set before you're putting that stuff out there. I mean, I want to be able to pull line off, but I don't want to have to work too hard, but I don't want it paying off, because I want to be able to control that fish and keep that rod bent. I mean, if you're working with just the drag of the reel, you're going to struggle a bit. And so I like to I want these fish to earn the drag a little, and I want to keep that rod bent and reel. And you have to turn that boat around so you don't get them lodged in the motor.
Yeah.
that's an issue when you're in them smaller boats and you have the long rods, is that they kind of go down and you're kind of,
Yeah.
it can be tough for you. So, I mean, for me, it's all about maximizing our opportunities, because we don't always get a lot. These coastal fisheries are pretty competitive, and there's a lot of good fishermen out there. So,
We got a question earlier about braid or mono for
Yeah.
your main line.
well, there's a lot of discussion on that. I use braid, and the reason I use braid is because it's just efficient. It doesn't break easy. It cuts through the water good, and it's just pretty much no stretch. Now, a lot of people who fish in barbless areas prefer the mono because there's some stretch to it and you kind of absorb that bite. I personally rely on exceptional rods and a good drag so that fish can pull line when it wants to, and then when it's close to the boat, that rod can absorb and kind of fight that. But mono works great. There is stretch in it, and you have to consider that when there's reactions to things in the water. And I actually think by having that braid, I'm a little more in tune with what's going on down in the bottom. From finding the bottom of the water to a bite happening, and it's nice to know when I'm getting a bite because I can kind of key in on the motor and help it out a little bit, you know.
We got Michael's asking, do you run right below the boat in shallow water?
Yes.
In shallow water situations.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me a bit. These fish don't.
Do you run less weight?
No, I don't. Not in the fall. I mean, you can get it back there if it's an issue, and I know there's like the LC. We have some sections that are when you're trolling that. I don't fish it, but I've done it and really shallow, and it's you definitely there. If you're fishing in that water where it's like 6 foot there by Drift Creek, you're going to want to get away from the boat. Guys that are doing that are using actually jet divers in line, and they're kind of paying them back there a little ways, and that's how they get away from the boat. But you can also use like 4 or 5 ounces of lead. And
I know we
do that
fished
too.
Tillamook years ago, and it's super shallow, and,
Right.
and we were right next to the boat. I
Yeah.
mean, you'd troll a lot of spinners there without flashers, so you
Right.
can feel like slackline bites.
Sure.
But you'd feel it set the hook, and that fish comes up 4 feet away from you. It's
Yeah,
crazy. It
I
doesn't
don't.
seem
I don't
like
think
that-
salmon care. I mean, with that, I mean, we've caught them on, you know, when we're actually kind of starting to move upriver, and we'll get into that in the next one. But back bouncing right in the prop wash and fish bite. So I fish in tune with the bottom, so I like to be close to the boat. That also helps when you're around a lot of other boats. You can cut and turn and not go over somebody's line. You kind of, part of not being snagged all day and knowing where you're at is kind of being intimate with the bottom of the river. And I think in the fall, where we're starting to fish these shallower waters, I am on the bottom on the outgoing and on the flood. That's another question. On the flood, do you kind of suspend? I don't. I find bottom, crank up. And I'm always doing that, and I make sure that my guys are always close to the bottom.
Tyler's asking, do you set the hook with the motor?
I do, after it's loaded, not too early. And the reason I do that is because I don't want my guys setting the hook, and we're not jerking it, we're just ensuring that we don't get slack when we're making that transition from standing
Sometimes
up
they
to
can
rod
run
out of
right
the
to you,
holder.
yeah.
And I'll keep that until we have everything kind of going, and then I'll back off on it, and then we'll go backwards, circles, whatever it takes to get the fish in the net. But I think that's a big deal, especially in those areas where you have barbless hooks. It'll add fish to the boat, and I do it all the time. And you've seen it, if you've watched any of our videos, I mean, we've had a couple where it's like slack, we know there's a fish there, and you rev up, and then the rod loads,
Yeah.
and it helps.
And that's
It's,
another thing with the limber 10.5 foot rods, because I think a lot of
Right.
times they're chewing it. And we've had times in that intro video, if you watched it, there was one fish, it did this, and one of our last videos, the same thing. And maybe a minute later, that fish is still on. It's just swimming with you, and it's allowing that
we
fish
actually
to chew
trolled
on
a
it.
25 pounder for about, I think, 20 yards. We had a bite, and it was missed, and it was kind of just acting weird.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's just fouled up. You know, sometimes the flashers will get fouled up, and I was like, and I just kind of gassed it, and the thing loaded, and that fish was just kind of coming with us for whatever reason, and it worked out. So that's how we double checked that the fish are there. So
Cool.
yeah.
You want to get into
Yeah,
brining?
we'll do the brines, and so because I fish tomorrow, I'm going to go over a couple brines that I do, and mine are very
Somebody
simple.
was asking earlier,
Yeah.
favorite color of brine.
Natural.
Natural.
I like natural, and I'm going to show you guys something here, which is kind of cool. Which is when it gets to colors. You know, the colored brines work great, and a couple different brands out there, and they all work really good. And you got the fire dyes from Potskis, or you even got the Procure stuff. The badass bait dye works really well too. So there's I use Potskis obviously, but because it works pretty good and it's super easy, and I like that. The blue, this is a fish killer. This is something that there's just times of the day that blue works. Now, I don't designate trays and trays to a color, so you can be very conservative with this in your brines. You can add like a half a tray and do blue fire brine and get a really nice bait. Or chartreuse. Chartreuse, we all know salmon like that color. It works great, and so it's okay if you wanted to use a quarter bottle in a Ziploc bag the night before, put 5 or 6 in there, and maybe that's going to get you one more fish. And I think in many cases that's what happens. Having options, being stuck to one thing, that's what you got, and so it doesn't take much to do.
It's probably like Steelhead. You can go through fish with a certain color and switch up, and you get fish to bite.
Yeah, for sure. And so what I do is I like natural. I think natural is tough to beat, but the way I kind of do my baits, I can always change in a second. So I got a couple products up here. I got the Firepower, which this is a krill. This is all krill. So we know
100%.
that stuff works. It's krill, yeah.
Well, and they're feeding on that out in the ocean.
Yep.
You go through bait balls.
You know, and with all of our egg cures, which we're going to get into in the next one when we start talking about float fishing and back bouncing and eggs and how to cure eggs, we're going to talk about the cure. I mean, our Braxifires and stuff are loaded with krill and the fire cure and stuff, and then our version of the dyes are the fire dye, and we have every color that you can think of: purple, blue, pink, red, you name it, chartreuse, and they work really good, and it goes a long way. But you can see I got it on my hands. But what I like to do with my baits is,
if you know somebody that hasn't brine bait before, invite them to come on watch this.
Yeah, this is
gonna jump in. This bait works. The brine works good because we've had some epic days.
Everybody has secret brines, and you know, there's a lot of
Want some gloves?
yeah, look at my hands, man. I haven't had gloves in like a week. So you don't get gloves, they crack, they get, in that salt and stuff, and then you can't bait hooks, and people start laughing at you in the boat. And that's me right now. But yeah, perfect. We got paper towels too, which are nice.
Quick question: if you're fishing an incoming tide in the jaws and the hot bite dies off, do you move upriver to find a bite again? And how fast do you think those fish are moving?
Oh crap! I move. I don't like not getting fish. And the other thing is to pay attention to what's going on around you. I mean, if you got a lot of good guides around you, or guys they're just fish killers, and you're one of those guys, and you're not getting bit, and the 30 other boats aren't getting bit, it's time to move. That's why you always see us on the phone. I mean, we want to know. We want to know where the best, because fish bite different times. So when you're down there at the jaws, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Go down there when the bite's there, make it happen. Sometimes you miss it. Now cell phone bites are tough because you can get there just after everything happened and realize you wasted a lot of time traveling. So it's best to kind of learn the tides. And honestly, every river's a bit different, but I really like being down there at the mouth, at the start of the incoming, kind of get that we call the fresh fish. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty traditional on that too. I like to hold against that current at the mouth, right on that edge line, and tap the bottom reel up, maybe suspend a bait or two, and then if the current will let me, I'll turn and I'll start trolling with the tide in the lines that you catch fish in, and then I'll do that. And if we don't get fish, I move, and then I'll go up river and I'll hit spots. But you kind of have your holes you want to hit. It just depends how far away you are.
That's the thing when we're in the drift boat is we'll see guys taking off. You'll see all the guides like they found gold, racing off, and you can't follow them when you're in a slow boat. So don't get discouraged, because a lot of times a bite might be going off, but that doesn't mean that there aren't bites that are going to go off. It seems like it's a time thing, not necessarily a place. So we know a lot of times we'll be like, oh man, we had this great bite at noon
Right.
at this hole, and then we'll talk to him, and he's like, oh yeah, I was down at the mouth. And
Well,
they were
that's
killing
because
it.
high tide's at 12, and then
Yeah.
when you get upriver, it's at 12:30 or 12:45, and so
don't
those
panic.
are the issues. And fish are there everywhere. I mean, they're all over the river. That's where are you guys fishing? In the river,
Yeah.
and there's fish in the river up through all Tidewater. So you got to just kind of put your time in, but it's kind of tough. But a tip, this is a tip. If you see guides on the water, they're there because they know where to be. And the reason I say that is that they just have the chance to do it more, and so they're a bit more polished and more keen in on the bites
And you
and
have
where
to have
patterns have happened.
Yeah.
And so if you see them there, it's a good idea. I mean, there's a couple guides that I see on the water, and it validates what I've been thinking. Like, okay, this guy's here. I'm doing the right thing. I'm in the right area, and I'm not proud enough to not admit that. I mean, there's guys like, yes, when I'm on the Columbia, there's a couple guides that if I'm in that area, Eric Lindy, if you're around him, you're in the right spot, and the Clancy's crews, you're in the fish. It's like one of the best fish finders on the Columbia. And then down here we have our other guys, but it's a great way to find fish, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, but with the baits, so I like to have pretty much two batches of bait. I have a natural kind of bait that I tweak with, and then I have a natural bait that's got some anise, and that way I have that because we know that works all the time, and you got to have it. But how I do my baits is pretty simple. Now, if you're using frozen baits work good. The neat thing about a frozen bait is that they actually troll pretty good for a while. The downside is you really can't preserve the scales when you start fishing with them. So, but they're fishy, they're straight to the hook. You can have issues sometimes getting them on your triple hook system because the guts are in there and they're rock solid.
Yeah.
But you kind of do it and it works. But when you start brining your baits, I like to kind of thaw them a little bit. I think when they go in a little bit soft, they kind of absorb that brine a bit better, and you'll see the scales kind of hold up. Now I'm missing some here because I've been handling them, but that's just kind of what I do. And so I want to maximize the clarity, and so I'm going to use the natural fire brine here. And like I said, this bait is getting used tomorrow. And so all those guys that are wondering what I'm doing differently, not much, except I like to use fresh baits every day. Now I do carry baits over.
Oh,
over.
that was one question we had. If you use a brine on your bait and you have extra bait at the end of the day, is there any way to store the bait and use it a week later? Or?
Not a week later. If you're within a day or two, I mean, some guys will freeze it, but we're talking that's kind of, tough times, man.
Bait's the most important.
That's the most important thing you have, and don't skimp on your bait. And it's always bad when your eggs aren't that good. Like maybe they just too runny, or you just if you lack confidence in your bait, you might as well go home.
Yeah.
So, but I will carry them over for one day, easy. If I don't use all my baits, they're going to fish tomorrow because they're in the brine, and I just leave them in. And the stuff with this fire brine, it's good for about 2 days, I think, in there. I mean, some guys
You
go
can
further.
sit in the brine.
Yeah.
And I noticed the colored stuff, it'll get more colored over time.
It
so
will.
with the natural, you don't have to worry
Yeah,
about that.
that's why I like doing the natural. Now, I still do blue sometimes and a little short truce. And like I said, when I'm doing this stuff, these bottles will last a lot longer than a natural because you saw I just poured a whole bag of bottle in here. But I don't want to do big batches. I'll put 2 trays in this with 1 bottle. And so I take the blue fire dye and I just kind of do just a couple, 2, 3 drops in there. And what you're going to see here, no holes in the bag, that's good. See that water there kind of turns a nice color. What you're going to see is that these baits are just going to absolutely
So
pop
they'll just
tomorrow.
have a hue of
They're going to have
blue.
a nice little hue in there. And so I'll just put these in, and these things are going to be deadly tomorrow.
Are you adding any salt or?
So I do. So what you will find is that they may not be hard enough for you, and then just kind of tough. I take a handful of kosher salt or even sea salt and throw in there. You can do rock salt. Rock salt really works good, but I don't know, I'm kind of the baits get dimply. It's kind of one of
Yeah.
those things. And
They start
when
to
they're
shrivel a little bit.
with this, if you're making a homebrew brine, I use a lot of rock salt because the rock salt lasts and it's very productive. So you could put, less rock salt in there, but you're going to have these baits and they're going to really tighten up on there, and you're going to have a good scale system there, and you can make that a little deeper blue and it's going to be a little bit more. So I mean, it's just you can kind of see there, those baits right there are just kind of really tight scaled, and tomorrow morning, man, those things are going to be fishy. They're going to have a slight little blue tinge to it, and you're not going to have a deep blue bait. You're going to have a natural colored bait, and you can look at your herring now and it's already got that kind of natural. Well, that's why with those home brews we use Miss Stewart's bluing. It's
Yeah.
kind of makes them pop. Well, the fire dye is very simple, and I could really control that, and it's UV, which is, it helps. I mean, I ain't going to question it. It works,
Yeah.
and that's what I do. And so I will do this, and then this batch here is going to get some anise in it. Okay? That batch is going to get anise. And then the other one that I'm going to do, just to kind of show you, so you know that I'm not lying to you, is I got that batch there, and then this other one, again, with these vacuum packed bags, guys, with your bait, when you thaw them out, you want to open the bag up. You don't want to thaw them with the bag vacuumed on, because it'll the scale will start to fall off. These are still kind of frozen, which is, it's fine if they're frozen. But with this one, I'm down. I guess I didn't bring another natural fire brine. That's cool. Either way, what I'll just do it right now. But the difference is this one I will do a bottle of natural in it. So I'll do that when I get home, and then I will.
Mike's in here.
Okay, and what I'll do then, I'll add just krill. I'll just do krill. I'll bring you one. But anyway, this one here, again, I like to go to the natural, and then I'll get it on the hooks, and I'll poke my bag, and that'll be a problem.
If anybody's got Chromecast on their TV, I'm pretty sure Facebook's got a Chromecast button built in, so you can
Right.
see our mugs right on your big TV.
So natural. So I got this opened up, and I'm actually pretty liberal with the krill, guys. I'm gonna dump it in there like that. It's gonna turn kind of red, but your bait's still gonna be natural. But this is gonna have a real overpowering krill smell to that herring right there.
Yeah,
So you can see the
smell it.
color of it. You can smell it. And then this is just gonna go in there. These baits are just gonna kind of go in there. And yes, I will add a little bit of salt to it.
Is that because the krill's kind of doing something different, or do you notice
I
it?
don't know. I just think that, if I gave these things, people always ask, how long does it take for this brine to take effect? I like to do it about right now, or even right when I get home from fishing, and then put it in there, and they'll be about right. But depending
day
on the
goes
tide, and they'll get better as the day goes on. And the key thing is that they go right to the cooler. They got to be packed on ice. I want cold baits. I think people don't cool their baits enough, and what you get is you just get a poor
I
bait.
always like my hands frozen when I'm digging in.
Yeah, I mean that's what I do, and then so this stuff works good, krill's good, and it's just been effective. And so you saw there, I got pretty much two cures I'm doing. I got one with a little bluing with anise, and then I have one natural with krill. And the reason I'm going to do the bluing in the krill is because I'm loading it with some red krill, and I just don't want to mess with that color a little bit. I mean, I guess I could probably even add a little pink drop or two and get a kind of a awesome pink tinge to it, but I do default to natural, so that's why I'm doing that.
Randy Grimes is asking what brand of anise do you use?
I like a pure anise, and the best stuff that I found is from ProCure. It's on the shelf here. I use it. Works really good. I know you can get some stuff if you've got a chemical license. I do not.
How much do you use? Just a few drops?
A few drops, and then you guys also have krill anise. It's pretty powerful, and I use that stuff too.
Yeah.
That stuff works. We know it works great for steelhead, but it's got krill, and it's a really strong red natural color, and a few drops goes a long way.
Do you ever inject your baits?
Yeah, I used to do that a lot, and then I just started I kind of go back and forth. The reason I went away from injecting my baits individually, was because having that injection system, was kind of, kind of tough. So, oh, he does. Okay, sorry about that. Here you go. So there's this. This is what I'm using right here, and this one's got the dropper on it too. My jar doesn't have. I have to pour it. So how much do I put in? A little bit. That's what I'm doing.
Don't spill
So
it. We did that
people,
once.
it's funny. Matt Hall said he's so scientific about everything. I mean, he's got a jib on his deal for leaders, and maybe that's why he's so dang good. But he would probably do 2.5 drops. I do like a dash.
2 1/4.
I'm a dash type of guy.
Yeah.
A pinch.
Yeah.
And that's funny because when I do my egg cures, it's a handful of this, it's a pinch of that, and
Yeah.
and we'll show you that egg cure here pretty, on the next one. But I use just a little bit of anise, and it doesn't matter if it's strong or not. But the thing is this stuff will actually get white clumps if your bait's cold enough, because it does get solidified because
Yeah.
it's pure. So that's fine too. It'll have that scent in there, and it'll be pretty strong, and fish love it.
I'm one
so.
that likes to measure everything out. But
Yeah.
It's all confidence, I think, is what
Yep.
it comes down to. If you're in the ballpark, you're good.
Right. The other thing I do, which is I think it is a pet peeve of mine, is I make sure that I trim the tags on my hooks really good. I use fingernail clippers for that, because if you don't do that, when you're putting these through your baits, you'll blow out the sides, and you'll put big holes in there, especially if you didn't get all the guts out.
So you just pull on it as hard as you
Pull it
can to make sure it's
tight.
locked.
Yeah, get your scissors or something and just give it a pull. And
How many loops are you doing on your?
4. I do
4.
I do 4, then 4, 4, then 4, 4, then 4. I mean, I'm not putting an egg ball on there, so I don't need it big. But with that 30-pound STS, it's strong, ties a good knot.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I do with my baits, and they work pretty good. And then I want to show you. I don't know why I took off my stinking gloves, but I'm going to show you what I do for adding a color. This is an important thing to show you, and kind of why I do it. I'm going to pull out a bait from a leftover bait that I'm going to use tomorrow. This is a leftover bait right there, and I want to add. One more Ziploc. But one more. I'll just do this. Right
We
here.
always run fresh bait as much as possible. If you make a good pass, especially when you don't get to make as many passes, we go through, put fresh bait on. That was one of the questions.
Sure.
We'll make a run and put fresh bait on after each pass. Your bait might still look good, but it doesn't hurt to have fresh scales out there and good smelling bait.
So I am gonna dye a bait really quick, and this will show you how quickly you can go to a blue bait. It's like you want to try it, but you don't want to commit everything to it. You can then just take a little bit like this, and squirt it in the bottle, in your Ziploc bag or whatever's ideal. But I ran out because I used them for cures. Take that bait, that's your natural brine, drop it in, just like that. Let it sit. That thing right there will be ready to go in just a few minutes. And I'll put it in the cooler in my Ziploc bag, and we'll look at it here in just a second to show you how good it is and how blue it is, and it will provide you that. And it's a UV color, and it's just the blue fire dye, but you can do whatever color you wanted and do just fine. So for me, that's
Do you add
kinda,
any other scents on the water, or do you just pretty much keep it simple?
I keep it simple. I know there's a lot of stuff, and I look at boats and they look like a medicine cabinet, and they all work.
Yeah.
But for me, the problem with scents is I don't think they last long enough, and especially when it's getting 90 degrees in the boat and then all that stuff. I just like to keep it very simple to the basics that catch fish, and it seems like they do. Garlic does work really well. There are some other scents out there, but because I add krill and I put anise at the beginning, if I need to do garlic, that's when I used to do a lot of injecting, just to kind of get a little extra scent on a bait. It works.
I don't know if you went over dropper length at all. Somebody was asking earlier.
Right.
Is there a specific dropper length?
I do. I like 14. I mean, 12 inches, 14 inches. Now, this again, this is just going to be here. I got it right here. This is just going to be about 14 inches on the dropper. It's nothing big. I just pulled it off the slider, but remember, this is going to be angled. I want to be close to the bottom. I know some guys use bigger, and there's some fisheries for that. But when I'm trolling in for fall Chinook, I like to do the 14-inch dropper. It just works. It's average, and I mean, I honestly, I bet you if you looked at my system, it's the same system on the back of a package. It was very basic because it works.
So your main line's a braid. What pound?
65. I like a 65-pound braid. There's all sorts of colors. Doesn't matter. I like to be able to see my lines for sure. So a dark line is hard because I want to be able to watch angles as the sun changes colors and things like that. But I like the braid because of the durability, and I don't like stretch. I don't want stretch. I got to drag and rod for that, and I want to see it tap bottom instantly, so I'm not getting snagged, because there's a lot of snags on these coastal streams, and where we're in that Tidewater. And then I want to be able, I want a bite to be instant. I want to see it, be patient, know when to load that rod and get that fish. And I want that fish to get stung too, because if they're on that braid and that rod's doing its job, it's important. And
Brian's asking what pound test for your dropper.
I use 25 or 30. And you know what? When I get snagged, it's going to be tight. I mean, I'll break it off and I'll.
Do you
whatever.
find that you end up breaking off too easy with lighter dropper?
I do, and I don't like losing lead. And the other thing is we get tangled. I get multiple tangles a day, from a fish going into a line to not dropping them in correctly when we have a lot of people in the boat, and we have weight, bumper, flasher, leader into a tangled mess. And when it's a little bit heavier, what I find out is I can untangle it quicker.
Yeah.
I take off the weight, I get that thing out of the way, and then it kind of, and especially with the fluorocarbon being a stiffer line, it kind of unravels, and then and with the bead chain, I kind of lay it out straight, and then I put it in the water. Where a mono, it would be kind of done deal, start cutting and be over it. So
Michael Saunders is asking what brand of braid for your main line.
I use Power Pro. There's others, but Power Pro works, and it's proven, And
also
there's Slick, and that's what it's called, right? Slick. I use that. It's extremely limp, but it's nice because it doesn't bind as much in the reel. So there's advantages to it, and I guess the things I don't like about it aren't that big, and that's like tying that first knot and dealing with that. But after that, it's pretty durable, works pretty good.
What knot do you use for the braid to the swivel?
You could use what they call that trilene knot, which is that double improved cinch, they call it, or you can use the polymer knot, which I use. I use that most of the time. So I use both, but you definitely need something that doesn't slip. So that's why we have those knots. But the polymer knot is the ideal one. And then, that's pretty much it. And I like bead chains. I like things to keep things spinning, and I like clips because, if I wanted to change to all, Dodgers or something, I unclip, clip in, and it's a done deal very quick. And that also helps me when I'm in rough conditions and I can't get to a rod. Chad can do it. I can just say unclip, reclip, and it's quick. And the other tip that I do for my weights, because you do change weights, is I like to color my weights. My 10s are black, I have gray for my 12s, and my 8s are natural, and my 16s are natural, so I can look down and say, grab the black weight. We're using that one. Yeah. And I know what guys are finding, because after you run them a little bit, they wear off, and you don't know. And so, and knowing what weights are, because I'm pretty adamant about getting them in the water, reeling up the tips, setting the counters, and then organizing it so that we can have idea where we're at, especially when, maybe you don't fish very much. If you don't fish very much, you need a little help.
I know we used to run 8 ounce a lot, and we were trolling faster in the drift boat just because the trolling motor won't go super slow, and it made a huge difference in our hookup ratio going to 10 and 12. I mean, it's the angle's critical having a 45, but just you're on the bottom when the tide changes. Sometimes it speeds up,
you
and
can feel
all of a sudden you're way
on.
behind the boat. Seems like you get snagged up more when you're back further behind the boat.
Well, you lose. You just kind of lose you can't see the rod action as much. I mean, that's a crucial part, and it's cool to be on the river relaxing, but I'm there to catch fish, and so I'm going to be really keyed in on the tips. I mean, that's my job. But even when you're
Is there a certain angle fishing, you like on your rod in the holder?
Yeah, I like my rods parallel out, and the reason for that is they're at kind of a natural angle to the river. When the fish bite, everything kind of goes that direction, so that there's less anything. So I like my rods out so that when they get bit, everything's kind of very natural, and it's easy to watch my lines. When I get something way high, I feel like I just kind of lose control of the rod a little bit. So
Brian's asking, how do you like your drag set?
you know, I like them not super tight. I want to be able to kind of just pull line off of it. Now, I do want fish to be able to grab and make that big run and get it out of their system. I don't want to break a fish off ever, you know, in the first pull. So I want to be able to do that, and I can tell them to do a click or two forward. And having the drags that make a noise, that are kind of a positive drag, is nice because you can change. But I usually have them set to where you don't have to do that. And I like to be able to, a salmon needs to earn the pull. And so yes, why you have to have faith in your line. 65-pound braid is why I use that, and I use 30-pound leaders. Sometimes I use 40 just fine. I like 30 because it's easier to rig around your bait. So with my spinners though, I use 40-pound. I want to clarify that when I use spinners.
What's your go-to weight in ounces?
In the fall, 10 ounces.
10 ounces.
10 and 12. 10 and 12. And if like today I had 4 people, we fished 10 ounces all the way around. We got down to the mouth, we fished 16s and 12s.
Is it a line angle or just
Speed and angle.
Speed and angle.
Speed and angle. I feel like with 10, I can maintain the speed that I'm looking for. I can move fast, and I can maintain those angles. If I was using like a 6, to maintain that angle, I'd be trolling a lot slower. Yes, I would still have that angle, but I would be slower. That's correct. Yes.
David's asking, do you fish whole herring or plug cut? You kind of went over that.
I went both. I do both, and you know, and that's why I use that triple hook setup again. You know, so I have the opportunity to go to both really quick, and there's just some moments that the fish key in on a different bait.
Yeah.
I mean, there's guys out there using blue label herring that they're a big bait when they're cut down. Well, this green label with a head on is pretty big.
Yeah.
So like I said, to get that action on these full baits, you know, just rig that middle hook dead center of that body, and then bend this thing up. And you can actually, with these full baits, you can actually get a pretty good, like I said, a really good bend to it, and it's going to work.
Plus, that's what they're seeing when they're, you know, out they're not seeing a fishless or a headless fish.
No, and you know, the cut plug works because we have an action that presents, and that's why. But whole herring works good, and I think this works really good when you're fishing. I think this works really good when you're fishing right at the edge of the ocean, right there in that bubble. It's a good, strong bait when you're starting to deal with that heavy pull there, when it's on the end of the outgoing, or, you know, when that flood starts to really kick in. This bait, when you have those pulses in the tide right there, right at the exchanges, you won't see your baits blowing out as much. So
why the bend in the whole herring?
Because the bend allows it to kind of roll, and this is going to give you like an old school traditional roll. It's going to be really kind of a bigger roll, where the cut bait is going to be a little bit tighter. I still prefer a cut bait, but you know, there's just days you want to fish that full bait, or I get tired of blowing baits out. I'll put a few, so I know that I'm fishing.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm not a big plastic hood, you know, all that stuff. I don't like it. It's just too much stuff. So I do that. Not that they don't work. They do, but I like kind of keeping the baits.
John's asking your go-to flasher color.
If I had one flasher,
Yeah.
Sweet Abby.
Sweet Abby.
Sweet Abby.
Short bust.
Short bust, Sweet Abby. Yeah, I have no secrets, man, with me. That's why my clients fish with me. I tell them my whole book. I like this one. Actually, the first one I got, JT gave me this on the river, and I instantly caught a fish. And I was like, that's a color I like. So I always have one on there, Sweet Abby, and you know, they all work. Hallucinator's a good color to have. You should always have the pole dancers out there. In the fall, that electric pole dancer is a fishy color. It's just those greens, you know. Greens fish all the
and I
time.
think a lot
all
of
the time. That's the thing. They fish all
green.
day.
We fish cone zones a lot, and we've used those for years.
Right.
And it's a little different action, but it's, you know, you get confidence in something, and it's huge.
Right.
And you can match colors, you know, depending on which type of flasher you're using.
Right. Guys, I know guys that are doing that here at the shop. They come here and talk to Mike, and they get just the frames, and then they buy the tape, and you know, that's the other thing I want to add really quick. I mean, you see, you know, guys that don't know, Mike's shop, what's cool about it is it's a pro shop, and this is where you get specialty stuff. If you want to make this, or you want to have all your spinners done. I mean, when I was going to Nushagak, we had all of our spinners made here, and they're making our spinners. I mean, the one I have laying around here somewhere is here, and you can really customize your stuff and
So yeah, we'll
get it done.
We'll
It's
go
good
through
stuff.
and just answer your guys' questions. We might repeat some stuff, but yeah, it's for people that maybe weren't here at the beginning. Tyler's asking, prefer rod action for trolling.
It's moderate action. I'm gonna get my rod in here because I'm gonna do. I gotta go over this to do it correctly. So I'm gonna step out for a second. So I use edge rods, but you don't need to use an edge rod to catch fish and have awesome rods. Okay, let's just put that clear. But these rods are incredible. This is a moderate to medium heavy. This is a 1065, so it's a kind of a 5-power rod, 10.5. That's where we kind of get those numbers. Pretty much it says 10 to 40. So this rod is the 1065. This medium heavy rod, moderate tip, medium heavy action, is what I'm going to use for 12s, 16s. You can use Delta divers if you're doing that out in the ocean. Buoy 10, this is the rod I use at Buoy 10. This is the rod that I've been using every day. Fishes 10s really well. I use it when I'm fishing my Dodgers because these pull harder. So I want a little bit heavier action rod. The thing is to have this heavy action, you got to have the tip still do what the tip's supposed to do, and that is let that fish chew on that herring without feeling the problem.
Yeah,
and
I see a lot of guys on the river, and they're using really stiff rods.
Or short rods.
Or short
and
stiff rods. Yeah.
It's an issue, and so, like I said, this rod is balanced and it handles the heavier weight quite well. So I think if I had one rod to fish with, it would be this rod right here, 10.5. It'd be the SA 1065, moderate action, medium heavy. It's ideal for fall Chinook, spring Chinook, whatever. When I'm fishing, like I said, this allows me to fish 12s and 16s if I'm fishing right there at the mouth, like we do a lot, where we start fishing there right on the bubble, right on that edge, where we use heavier weights sometimes. This allows me to have the weight, a heavy weight, but not have my rod bottomed out already. If your rod is bottomed out because it's too light, you're going to miss 2 stages of that rod, the tip action and then the medium action of that rod ability to load on a bite, and so you'll lose fish. So you got to have that. Yeah, that's
David's
it.
asking, how effective is trolling herring in upper Tidewater?
I think it's good. I mean, the river, my home river that I fish all the time, we have a really good troll fishery up there, and I still do the same thing. I mean, it's Tidewater.
The water is a lot of times it gets a little warmer.
Yeah,
I think as you get upriver.
Try spinners and
Yeah,
stuff like
spinners.
that, and first light, you can always go to do a little troll, cover some water, find some fish, then go to the floats. I mean, there's guys that just because so-and-so is float fishing doesn't mean you have to float fish there. Now, it is good to play well with others, though, if you don't want to come in there and ruin it for everybody else. So, I mean, but
Go trolling through the bobbers.
yeah, so but it works quite well, being able to troll in the upper Tidewater. And, as I actually move up in the Tidewater quite a bit when we have bigger tides, and as the season progresses and we start getting big shots of rain, I'll move upriver. So
Yeah, and a lot of times you'll hear, if you go into your local tackle shop, they can tell you when the fish are moving.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times at a certain time in the fall, these big groups start moving upriver, and you can kind of follow them.
Right.
And local shops will kind of know where those fish are going, and especially as it gets later in the fall.
When you start moving up and it starts slimming down, that's where I might consider lightening up the lead a little bit and taking off the flasher and just running, naked herring out there with nothing more than that. And like I said, in the fall, I'm on the bottom first, and then I kind of come up from there. But even if I'm marking fish up in the column in these small little rivers, I tend to just be on the bottom.
Brian's asking, do we use 10-6 rods in our drift boat? Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Well, and for us, it allows us to get a little bit wider spread
Right.
in a small boat. So, and now that you can run 2 rods each on some of these coastal rivers, we'll run 2 up front and then 2 out the back, and try to keep them spread out as much as you can
Right.
in a small boat. And yeah,
And if you're running 4 rods of 2 guys in a small boat, you got to be even more prepared. So that's think ahead.
There used to be a lot of sayings like, oh, at the back I'll use these shorter rods and I'll kind of get bigger. Well, you don't really need to do that, even in a small boat, if you position your stuff right. And the tricks you can do is you can use a little bit lighter weight out the back to kind of spread out your bait a little bit, and use heavier up front if you're trying to fish 3 or 4 rods. That's a very standard trick that we're doing. That's why a lot of times you'll see us use 10s, 12s, and even 16s. It's not because we're trying to troll any different. It's because we want our gear to not bundle up into a big old pile.
Do you run anything different for first light? For us, no.
The biggest trick to first light is being in the water.
Yeah.
And the fish bite. I mean, it's consistent in the fall. I don't know what it is, but those fish bite. And I want to, because I almost forgot. I would have forgotten. That would have been a bummer. But this is a bait that I just put in, and I do this every day. And I'm going to kind of tamp dry this so I just kind of see how durable the coloring is. So I kind of rolled it on a paper towel, but you can see this bait here is, we'll get kind of zoomed in on it, but this bait is a blue, it's dyed blue, and it's ready to go. I mean, this bait, and I took some of it off too, but it's dyed enough. That color will last on that bait for a long, long troll. I do like to use baits as fresh as possible, and change them out a lot, but that bait, now we have a blue bait to try, good to go. Cut the head off, fish it whole. I don't have a whole tray.
Yeah.
Set
So then,
to blue.
if they're biting it, then
I
you'll
put
just
some
do a
more
bag,
in
2 or 3.
Yeah, I'll just do a couple more. And and if it's really good and blue's like a consistent killer every day, I'll start adding more to the brine. But for the most part, I do just stick to the natural. It seems to work.
Sean's asking, vent your bait, yes or no? I think
Yes,
you said yes.
I do once if they're not frozen. If they're frozen, I just cut them and get them on the hook. If I pull the guts out if they come out, and then I vent, and I vent even if I have guts in there and they're brine baits.
Sherry's asking if you're seeing fish jumping. Other than that, is that you want to fish there? If there's fish jumping, do they seem to bite more?
We saw fish jumping today, and those fish are just kind of moving.
Yeah.
I think they're moving. They're in the upper column, and I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of questions on why they're doing that, but those fish are moving, and it doesn't necessarily. You could fish it. We know there's fish there, so yeah, we're going to fish it, but it doesn't mean we're going to get bit there.
Eric's asking about super baits. We haven't really ran them at all.
Right.
Have
well,
you?
They're like beads to me. I'm not going to lie, but I have a good buddy who's he took me to school on it. They're very effective. Give them a shot. You'll like them. And 2 things you'll find out. 1, you're going to save a lot of money on bait, and you're going to like them. But don't sell the farm on them. There's nothing better than a real bait. There's places for it.
Yeah.
And try it. I mean, give it a go. The neat thing about the super bait is you can get the different colors like you would any. And we know salmon like lures, so you could do that, and then you could add, bloody tuna, in there. You could cut up some herring and stuff in there, tuna belly, sardine. I mean, you could really get crazy with the flavors in there.
Well, you run bait until it's ragged. For us, we change it a lot because I think bait is essential, and I always want really good looking bait. Same with fish and roe, same thing.
Right.
You're probably
you
might conserve it a little more because you're going through.
It depends. It just actually depends on how fast we start going through it. Now, the downside is when you have a lot of people in the boat, you go through a lot of bait. And that's fine, especially if we're going to catch a fish. I never put a bait in the water where I'm like, I should probably change that bait. If I think that, I change it. If it starts to really flare out, it's gone. Yeah. So on a super long troll, I'll come back, and if it's slightly, I'll get rid of it because they get hit pretty hard, especially if you've hit the bottom a few times. So you want to get rid of that bait, something shiny and bright. Don't waste an opportunity. It could be a fish on the very next pass. It's kind of the.
We're gonna take we'll take a few more questions here, and if you haven't liked and shared the video, go ahead and do that, and you'll get entered in to win some of the prizes here that Mike at Oregon Rod Reel and Tackle is giving away.
Right. Yeah. Good shop and some stuff, and we appreciate you guys for checking in on this, and like I said, nothing probably too new here, but there are some things that I think allow us to catch fish
Yeah.
maybe a little bit more regularly than some other
And
people.
we've been fortunate that we get to go with Kyle and a lot of good guides, and you learn this stuff. You know, I would suggest that you know, if you're just getting into it, hire a guide, because you'll take years off of
The learning curve is there.
and it's helped us tremendously.
Some
And then-
guides don't like to do that, but it doesn't. The guys who don't have to worry about like it. You know, I have a lot of good fishermen that are clients of mine, and they book me because, one, I share information. They have good times on the water, and they also come back because they want to actually not run a boat sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's when you run the boat, you don't necessarily get to fight the fish all the
Yeah,
time.
it's probably actually cheaper to hire a guide instead of buy a boat.
It is, yeah. But I don't know. Sometimes it's just nice doing it yourself too, though. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty much
Go
it.
ahead and ask any more questions. And we're gonna be doing this once a month, and each month we'll go over the current fishery. So next month we're gonna be doing upriver, fall Chinook. We'll be talking float fishing, back bouncing, maybe plugs, diver and bait, and then
we'll cure some eggs.
Kyle will cure some eggs.
Yep, cure some eggs and go through the prep process for that, and kind of how to get a good bait to catch fish, because that's kind of priority number one. You know, if we're going to end on something good, important, and that's it, do not skimp on your bait. Make sure you take the time to, you know, if you're into brining them, brine them. If you're going to run them fresh frozen, that's fine too, but change out those baits and then bleed out your fish. Now, on another level with fishing, that's, you know, it's pretty competitive out there, but, you know, I watch it. Take that time for a good photo. I mean, I'll tell you what, you capture that moment with that fish out of the water, that's as good as it gets. You have that picture for a lot longer than you do to get to eat the fish. So
Yeah.
take the time, put it away, tag it, you know, be safe on the water, and then get back to trolling. So
We got should I pluck cud before or during brine?
you can do both. Do both. I have guys that plug all their baits, and I think it stiffens them up a little bit, no doubt about it. You know, that edge gets kind of harder, and I think they're a little more durable, and it makes them readily accessible for you when you're in a good bite and you know that they're already pre-cut. So
Yeah, and
I don't, but
yeah.
I do a couple in the morning to kind of get a small batch, and then I just throw them right back in the brine.
I like the super cold brine, so we'll do ours in bags just like that, and we'll put them in a little cooler with ice all around them.
Yeah.
And the bait for us stays good all day, whereas, you know, if it starts out not super cold, a lot of times they can soften up.
Sure.
Even though they're in a good brine, they can soften up.
They will. And if you're using frozen baits, which work really, really good, when I was, you know, buoy 10 running, most of the time I was fishing frozen baits. I would take my natural fire brine, have it in a couple bags, and I'd get my frozen bait, open it up, kind of break them apart, throw them in there, and what I found out is that 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock they're still frozen, because it just keeps them colder.
Yeah.
So when they're packed on ice, and I had popsicles all day long, and then those baits I didn't use up were brined for tomorrow, and it worked pretty good.
Brian's asking best quality eggs. You'll have to watch next month, because he'll go in depth.
There's guys bobber fishing right now.
Okay.
You know, the best quality eggs are right now. I mean, the fish that we're catching right now are the perfect size. Coho eggs are good, but right now the kings that we're catching, the skein to berry ratio is ideal.
Mm-hmm.
You could use them for everything from bobber fishing to even, you know, back bouncing, which you want something a little bit more durable when you're back bouncing. So I think right now, if you're catching some kings, they're nice. As these fish start turning into boots, the berries are too big, and I personally don't like a big buried egg, and you know, I want a good ratio there, and they're going to be nice and, you know, good size, skein length.
Cool.
So
Any
yeah,
other questions? We'll take one or two more, and then we'll be done.
but yeah, there's a lot going on and a lot of good fishing. I mean,
We're just getting started in the fall, so I mean,
Yeah.
it's going to be good probably till mid-October, beginning of October down in Tidewater, depending on which fishery you're in.
right, and just a couple more things to get you guys going, and to kind of learn some things. You know, the Steelhead Stalker website's got a lot of videos on there you guys can use to kind of get educated on setups too, and knots. if you're trying to learn a new knot or whatever. And then we got our fishing videos, and
Yeah.
we have most of the fisheries that we do, from Buoy 10, Saisla, Winchester Bay to the Columbia, on all those salmon fisheries, and we even have it down there on the elk for when we're talking tributary fishing. They got some on the Nestucca, all the rivers. So you can kind of, not only, it's kind of neat to watch a video from a river that you fish a lot, but it might validate something that you're doing.
Yeah.
Whatever. So
Yeah, we got
take a
lots
look.
of instructional videos. Pretty much all the knots that we talked about you can watch on the steelheadstalkers.com.
Right.
And this video will also be up for a while too, so if you kind of miss part of it, you'll be able to go back and watch it.
Right. Kind of nice. Everything's HD.
Yeah,
Good quality.
HD. Yeah, will be the quality will even be better next month. This is our first time, so we're just kind of getting it dialed in.
Yep.
4K with our new camera. When you're watching, if you got a 4K TV, even in HD, watching it in 4K is even better quality because of the bit rate. So
It's
pretty cool
actually
stuff.
pretty impressive.
Yeah.
It's really clear. It's
You got-
kind of almost looks.
Yeah, don't get the camera too close.
Yeah. So it looks pretty good. So right on.
Cool. Well, a bead fishing seminar in the winter. We will talk beads. We'll talk soft beads, hard beads.
Yep.
And yeah, every month we'll probably do 3 of these in the winter. So we'll cover bobber dogging, side drifting, float fishing,
And bank fishing
bank
too, which is a
fishing.
big one.
Yeah. So yeah, keep checking back. Like Steelhead Stalkers Facebook page so you get notification when we go live. Like Kyle, Willamette Valley Outfitters, and Oregon Rod Reel and Tackle. And
Kind of stay in on the stuff, and I use the business page as kind of the fishing report. Lets you know kind of how we're doing, and
yep.
and so I'll be taking a break here soon. We're going hunting, but it's time. So
Awesome.
but yeah, yep.
Well, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next month.
All right, thank you guys. Appreciate it.